Like, you got it. Cool. Spend it.
See, I grew, but I have that concept.
Yeah, my sister does.
Yeah.
Well, she used to before she got off whatever she is. But my grandpa, Merle, he grew up real dirt poor like that in the Panhandle, of Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl. So my grandma, yeah, no.
Call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second it.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next, is there anybody who'd like to speak to something that's not on the agenda? I know I have a few people signed up for the City Lake, but we have that on the agenda tonight. All right. Seeing none, go down to special reports and presentations. Roger. Can you hit the button on the mic? There you go.
It's green.
There you go.
Okay, I'm Roger Boyd, 510 3rd Street in Baldwin City. I'm chair of the Baldwin City Tree Board. We have been a Tree City USA recipient for 22 years, so this is our 22nd year. This past summer, the Tree Board and several volunteers did a tree survey, and I want to give you the results of that. There we go. We measured all of the trees within the city right-of-way, so these would be called street trees, and the right-of-way is between the curb and the sidewalk, or if there's no sidewalk, we would estimate 25 feet from the edge of the road. Each tree was entered on a Excel spreadsheet and referenced to the house number, and then they were numbered in sequence from east to west or north to south. All of this data that was collected, we started with diameter at breast height. That's the standard measurement of a diameter of a tree, about 48 inches. We estimated the condition of the tree, either good, fair, poor, or dead. We estimated the height of the tree in 15-foot intervals. And then all that was collected on our spreadsheet. My dendrology class did the same survey in May of 2003, so 21 years ago. So the purpose of the project is to further the mission of the Baldwin City Tree Board, which is to achieve an urban forest that is safe, healthy, diverse, pleasing to the senses, and functional. It provides valuable data on the makeup and the condition of the urban forest within the public right-of-way of the city of Baldwin. It does not measure trees within the yard, outside the right-of-way, the front yard, backyard, side yard, so just the street trees. So this survey is going to provide the following information. It'll tell us the species of trees, how many different species we have, the number of trees of each of those species, the overall condition of the urban forest, and it'll calculate a value of the urban forest, and we'll talk about how we do that calculation. And this will promote the protection and care of existing trees. If you know the value of the tree, it's a lot better than if you don't. And then we'll make comparisons with what we found 21 years ago. So this is a pie chart of 13 of the species. The big yellow pie there is 79 species all clustered together. So we came up with 3,367 trees in our survey this year. 50% of those trees are in that 6 species in that circle. So sugar maple was the largest, as we might expect. Silver maple, red cedar, hackberry, and black walnut. So those are the top 50% of all the trees that we counted. We came up with a total of 92 species of trees, and that was an increase from 83 species counted in 2003. And to put that in perspective, most cities in Kansas or eastern Kansas have 15 to 20 species. We had 92. Okay, in 2003, we actually counted 4,355 trees. This year, we counted 3,367. That's a decrease of 986 trees or 22%. And it might be a big gasp of, oh, we're losing trees. But keep in mind, this is only street trees. It doesn't tell us anything about what people are doing in their yards. If we think about what's happened in 20 years, our utility company is doing a much better job of keeping the trees out of the power lines. From a landowner's perspective, they don't have a whole lot of incentive to plant trees in their right of way if the top's going to be cut out. So it's not necessarily a negative that we've lost all those trees. We'd like to believe that people are still planting trees in their yard, but we don't have the data to support that. Okay, let's look at one species again, the sugar maple. In 2003, we had 835. This past year, 537. That's a decrease of 36%. That's a pretty good decrease. But if you look at hackberry, it's about half. Black walnut, about half. Sugar maple, or I'm sorry, silver maple, about the same. American elm, a decrease of probably about a third. Red maple went up just a little bit. Now you look at those three in the middle, hackberry, black walnut, and silver maple, not very many of those are planted. Those are mostly volunteer trees. So if they're volunteer trees, people didn't plant them, they're not as sorry about losing them. So that could also be another reason why we have such a decrease in the right of way. So my speculation is there's just less incentive to plant trees in the right of way, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, another thing we can look at is size of trees. So in these two lines here, you see 2003 is the green, 2024 is the magenta. The large trees are about the same number-wise. What is different is how many small trees in 2003 versus 2024. We have a lot fewer small trees, which tells us people are planting fewer trees in the right of way. Just kind of logic. Okay, now this is a lot of data. It's basically the average diameter per species. It's just the top 13 species. But what I want to focus on are the top 5. These are the biggest trees by average in the town. So pin oak, we didn't have as many of even black walnut, but all of them are huge. And so it comes out to be a large average size. Silver maples are large, Siberian elms are large, black walnut large, and then sugar maples. So those are the biggest by average in town. Ash tree is next, but the ash trees are going to be decreasing because they're dying from the emerald ash borer. Okay, what are some of the values that trees give us? Well, one is beauty and shade. A lot of trees are planted because of that. They reduce traffic noise. They can reduce sunlight. They can reduce soil erosion by holding the soil. They can reduce dust, which have been a good thing last Friday. They can provide privacy and screening. They can emphasize architectural design if they're planted properly. They certainly reduce CO2 and produce oxygen, and they can reduce pollution. They can also produce nut, fruits, timber, habitat. Those may not all be in town or urban qualities, but they certainly will do that. Okay, what are some of the economic advantages of trees? I have 4 quotes here. Properly placed trees can reduce air conditioning costs by 30%. They can reduce heating costs by 20 to 50%, and that's based on mostly cutting down wind. Landscaping, especially with trees, can increase property values by as much as 20%. Street trees shade the concrete and help cool the entire neighborhood. Naturally, the 60 million street trees have an average value of 525 per tree. That's a pretty small number you're going to see. Okay, how do we come up with those values? Well, jump down to the tiny print down there in the bottom row. This data is from Council Tree and Landscape Appraisers. So it is an organization that actually comes up with legitimate numbers. Okay, you have to have 4 factors. One is what's the basal area of the tree. So if you remember your algebra, basal area is the square inches of a circle. So we measure the diameter, and the calculation is pi r squared. So you calculate what the radius is, half of the diameter, square the radius, multiply that times pi. That'll give you the number of square inches on that surface. Okay, the next is a basic value. Now, in 2003, they came up with a figure of almost $25 per square inch of a trunk. 2019, which is the most recent data I could come up with, it was over $37 per square foot or square inch. I stuck with the 24.80 per square inch in this calculation. Okay, next thing is tree condition. If it's not in good condition, it's not going to have as high a value. So if it's good, give it 0.9 or 90%. If it's dead, it's 0. Now, woodpeckers would argue with that, but we're not really calculating the value to woodpeckers. Okay, species value. Not all trees are the same. So we would consider sugar maple to have a high value, but oaks, crabapple, magnolia, bald cypress, all of those would probably fit in the same category. So we'll give them a relative value of 1. On the other hand, Siberian elms, which break in windstorms and ice storms and so on, don't have as high a value. So we give them a 0.2. So our formula is square inches of the trunk times the dollar value, in this case almost $25, times the tree condition, times the species relative value. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples. There's our formula again. Let's take a 8-inch diameter bur oak, this happened to be over by the swimming pool. 8-inch diameter would give us 50 square inches. The condition is good, so that's 0.9. Relative value is 1. So our formula is 50 times the 2480 times 0.9, 0.1, and that tree is worth $1,116. Now, you look at a bigger tree. Let's use an example of a red oak that's 28 inches in diameter. It has square inches of 615. That calculation gives that tree value of 13,727. Now, you're not going to cut that tree down and get any value that worth that out of it. So what we're talking about here is these values are for live standing trees that contribute all of those values that we just listed. Okay, looking at some of the trees, let's say again the top 6 species with the highest values. As we might guess, sugar maples are at the top, and all the sugar maples in the street trees in the right-of-way value a little over $3 million. Next one in size, pin oaks, 1.4. Hackberry, black walnut, silver maple, again, these are basically volunteer trees, all had a value of about 900,000. And red oaks, because they're large, we didn't have as many, but large, almost $500,000. So those 6 trees come up to about 66% of the total value of all the trees in town, or 7.7 million. We look at the value of all the trees, those 3,300 trees, and we had a value of a little over almost 12 million, 11.7 million. And again, those are standing live trees. Now, park trees also have a function. In 2003, we actually went through all the parks and counted the trees. We didn't do that this summer. We didn't really have a whole lot of use of that data, but I did want to point out that the trees in the parks do have a lot of value. They might be providing natural settings, shading playgrounds, etc. Okay, here's the volunteers and the tree board that did this, counting from the Back row left, that's Cal Sink. If it's in bold, that means they're a tree board member. Chris Hamill, Sam Richards, Mel Getler, Eric Bailey. In the front row, myself, son John, Wendy Southard, and Steph Perry. So if they're circled, they're on the tree board, and some of those guys are in the crowd out here tonight. Okay, to summarize, again, we had a total of 3,367 trees, 22% decrease in the right-of-way, total of 92 species. Sugar maple was the dominant street tree with 537. 16% of all those counted and totaled about 3.1 million. The estimated value of the top 6 species was 7.7, and all the street trees together, 11.7 million. And just to point out, trees have many functions and values. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you for all your work, Roger. That had to take a lot of work to count all those and figure up all this stuff. So appreciate it. And we're fortunate to have somebody like you in our community to do this type of work.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next we'll go on to old business. I know there's a lot of people here to speak to various different items here. Our process is typically we'll introduce the item, let staff or contract employees talk to the item to kind of introduce it, to let everybody know what we're talking about, and then we'll ask for public comment at that time. We usually will not go back and forth with commenters. We'll listen. Once everybody's had an opportunity to comment, we'll shut down public comment, and that's the council's time to comment or to discuss the agenda item. So when we have a group that some may not always be here for these or have never been to a council meeting, I just like to explain kind of the process that we go through for each agenda item. So with that, first item is renewable energy credits. This was on the agenda from last council meeting. We have an opportunity to sell some energy credits that allow us to, I guess, claim renewable energy in our community. I think, Glenn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but on these numbers, but we'll collect around, if we sell them, 30,000 this year, or total of 50,000 this year, and then 20,000 per year based on what the market is.
Average price. That's great. And then you get more this year because of the back credits we've had since we've had the solar field.
Okay.
And those are still out there.
Okay. Anybody from the public like to comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, open it up for council discussion. Any further council discussion on this agenda item?
I think as we talked about last time, that just to be completely clear, if we sell these credits, the way I understand it is we're not allowed to publicize our renewable energy sources that we use.
Correct. We also found out, because I know Corey or somebody asked at the last council meeting if it would affect any grants,
Right.
and we were told no, that it doesn't affect any grants. We checked with staff at the utility committee, and Julie can chime in if I misstate this, but they didn't seem to have a concern with selling the energy credits either.
That's correct.
With that, any further council discussion? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to sell Baldwin City's renewable energy credits.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is a GRDA contract. Glenn, do you want to kind of give a synopsis, or is staff member here for that?
Summary here once again. GRDA, Grand River Dam Authority. We've had a 20-year contract. That's our base load contract, as we call it. That's 3 megawatts. They're located down in Oklahoma, and they're a mix of hydropower. Right now, coal, but they'll be getting away from coal, so they have gas and wind and everything. They got a mix Power. So we're at the end of that 20-year contract. They've offered us to renew it to 25 years and anywhere from 0 to 3. And we've had workshops and discussions on this now for a number of months, and I think the two offers that were considered by KMEA, our energy consultants, was that we would go with 1.5 or 2 megawatts as base load and bring that down because of the high capacity cost. The energy is cheap, but the capacity is pretty high on that. And given the fact we have our own generation, so we don't really need anybody's outside capacity, we can still get fairly cheap energy day ahead market. There's other sources out there. So their recommendation is to go with the 1.5 or the 2 megawatts and bring that down from the 3. So that'd be another 25-year contract. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment for this agenda item. Council discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of share what we discussed in the Budget and Finance Committee last 2 weeks ago. I'm not a big fan of recommendations coming out of committee, but with this being such a complex topic that includes solar, potential new solar, and options around GRDA level and then capacity versus energy, we took a real hard look at all those factors and came up with a recommendation. What I'd like to do, just a couple of slides, walk you through our logic and reasoning so you can see why, or if you have questions or you disagree, then that's where you'd say, no, that doesn't make sense. So as we go forward, since it's a 25-year commitment, I think we need to make sure we all understand exactly what's going on. So I'll try to share this. Did you get it in time? Okay. And I'll see if I can share a window. Okay. So like I said, this is come out of all the conversations we've had with KMEA, with our workshops, with the council meetings, with the budget and finance. So it's been multiple meetings. It's complex. I mean, it took us a long time to get it figured out. So the way to think about this is there are 2 hurdles we have to meet as a city, and they're actually separate, can be treated separately. You can buy them separately. One is capacity. So we have to own or buy off the open market enough capacity to meet our peak load for the city. So the highest daily number that we hit as a city, we've got to be able to meet that plus 15%. So we have to have capacity. And what the capacity is either our generators get rated for their capacity. You buy them and it's a 2 megawatt generator, you get 2 megawatts worth of capacity. Now, as you see here, it degrades over time. Your accredited capacity value goes lower and lower the older these get. So it's a shrinking benefit, and your capacity needs are going up, right? So your peak's probably going up every year. And as you see on the top line there, right under the year, that's our peak demand from 20 through 24 and then projected 25 through 29. So the green line there is 15% above that. So that's the capacity we need to have either contracted with our purchase price agreements or our own generation or a combination of both. And ours will be a combination of both. So simply what you see there is what our generators, and there's 7 of them now that we have, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're listed kind of from oldest to not oldest for newest, but you can see where they were installed when we installed them, what the initial capacity was in that first column. Then as you move to the right, you'll see that starting in 2026 in the gray shaded area, our accredited capacity starts dropping pretty rapidly on our oldest generators. In fact, it drops by 50% from 2026 to 2029. So we just have to take that into consideration, make sure we're signing up for a contract now for 25 years. We can't change it after we sign up for it. So we got to make sure it's enough to last us through this projected, need. So it's those kinds of things that we have to figure out. So the other things in here, we talk, and this also is related to the conversation around solar that we've had. The council's had an interest in adding to our solar production, and so there is capacity related to the solar, and you can see in the pink or purple. And I've loaded up three megawatts because we've talked about 3 megawatts, and you can see that would come online in 2027 if we built a 3 megawatt municipal solar field that we owned and operated. It would be behind the meter. So you can see what that would do it'd be 1.6 megawatts of capacity for, 27, 28, 29. So that's one assumption that we have to make, right? We can move that number down to 2, we can move it down to 1, we can move to 0 and see what that does. So what the green lines are really are capacity totals. You see that first green line below the purple line, that's our capacity for our internal assets, our generators and our solar field. That's what we own. That's our capacity accredited values and the forecast. So below that are our contracts. You contract both energy and capacity from these entities like GRDA. So you can see that in these purchase price agreements, you see the SPA, WAPA, and GRDA. You can see what we're allocated. They don't degrade, right? So we're contracting an amount that it's up to them to take care of their internal generation, but we get that capacity amount for the entire length of the contract. So we don't have to worry about our accredited value going down. So what I plugged in here and what the committee did is we plugged in both 2 and 1.5 in the new GRDA contract that would start basically in 26, like April of 26. And you can see if, the first 3 years of our 3 megawatts, we get 3.45 because actually in those contracts, we get our contracted energy value of 3 megawatts plus 15% for capacity. So we get basically 3.45 at 3 megawatts. So at 1.5, it'd be 1.73 for the remaining 4 years. So you plug that in, you get our total internal capacity with reserves. And the bottom one are our purchase price agreements that just give us capacity with no reserves. So what you see on the very bottom line is total accredited capacity on the green line. You add up all those capacity elements, and that's what you're showing. And you just compare that bottom green line to the top green line and see, do I have enough capacity? If that net capacity is negative, you wouldn't, right? So you can see we're slightly positive. We have slightly excess capacity, which we can actually sell on the open market if we have excess. And if we were negative, we'd have to go out to the open market and buy it. So what we modeled here was a GRDA contract of 1.5 megawatts and an additional community solar of 3 megawatts. And you can see projected out in 2029, we're still positive. Now, if you drop the community solar back to 2 megawatts, we're still right at break even. So there's that conversation right now around 2 to 3 megawatts. We haven't had that discussion, but just so you know, there would be leeway because once we sign the GRDA contract, we're stuck with that. And then we have to find other sources to get the rest of the capacity. And the other thing we talked about in budget and finance, and I think this council is going to have to really should look at is, as you can see, the degradation or of the accredited capacity value of our older generators. At some point, we're going to need to replace them, right? And it comes a point, and I think Corey brought it up, and we looked at it. The amount of capacity that these 1.7 megawatts or 1.8 megawatt or whatever, 1.8 megawatt generator is only getting 0.34 accredited capacity. If you stick a new 1.8 megawatt generator, you get 1.8 megawatts of capacity. So if you compare the cost of capacity, there's a pretty short ROI. What was that? We looked at maybe 5 years. Corey, do you remember?
That's about right.
Yeah. So you buy a new generator and it will actually pay for itself in the increased capacity value in about 5 years. So there needs to be a plan, and I know the utilities team is looking at that. At some time, we were going to have to retire downtown generators because they're old. They may just be not even considered by, you know, by KMEA as far as being able to have any capacity value. So that's something for the future to look at. So this is how we came up with the recommendation of 1.5 and then 2 or 3 on solar. It meets the capacity hurdle. So that gets us there with that. The other issue then is you got to buy energy. You either got to produce it or you have to buy it, right? And so what this shows, and we talked about that, the current we currently get in 24 our energy. Now we're not talking capacity. This is just the energy requirements. How many megawatts do we need in a year? You can see in 24 with our 3 megawatt GRDA PPA and all the other PPAs, that covered 82% of our energy needs for the year. 14% of that we actually were buying in the day ahead markets. We've been in that market just to fill in what we need. It's cheaper. So we've been there. We know how it works. It's not foreign to us. And then the other 4% is just our internal generation and solar. Okay, so both of those, that makes up 2024. And with what I just showed, with the 1.5 megawatt GRDA, you add the 1 megawatt Pratt solar, which we didn't have in 24, and then you add our 3 megawatt solar, municipal solar, you would see what our percentages would be of each. So we'd have 63% contracted, guaranteed. We would have approximately 16% generated by our now 4 megawatts, actually it'd be 5 megawatts of solar.
Four.
Three,
one right now.
1 plus 3 is 4 plus 1.
Oh,
Pratt.
with Pratt. Oh, yeah.
Right. So we could have potentially up to 5. So it's 5.
Behind the meter 4, but 5
4
total.
behind the meter,
Yeah.
but 4 total solar. So the question we talked about last time is, well, day ahead market is risky, right? Because, we all know history does not necessarily dictate what's going to happen in the future. So you don't know what that means. So you have a contract, you're pretty comfortable. You know that's what you're getting. We've been in the market for 14%. We've been comfortable with that. What we're proposing is jumping to 21. And so what I tried to do is give everybody a sense of what that risk really looks like. And the only way to do that is look at the last 11 years that KMA provided us, right? So if you go to this next one, it's very busy. He showed it last time. But really what this is showing, and just in a nutshell, the pink boxes are the day ahead market pricing or cost. And the orange boxes are what our contractual PPA or what we paid, right? Contractual on our generation, everything. So you can see that the pink boxes are always less than what we've paid, right? So just the first thing you see is, well, the day ahead market's been lower from 24 through 2020, which is true. And then 23 and 24. However, the Uri event, that winter event, you can see in 21 and 22, significant day ahead market issues. And, we've all talked about that, and that's the risk, right? Is we have more of those and you're stuck with buying a big percentage of day ahead market. It might not be as good a deal. So really just looking at these things, a couple of things to bring out is that if we just bought day ahead market, we didn't have our own generation, and you look at the last 11 years, I think it would be, and it's in your notes I shared with you guys, it would be, let me look it up here. So we would be slightly higher, like an average of, I don't have it here, is about $2 a megawatt hour higher over the last 11 years if we just bought all day ahead market versus anything that we did. Now you throw in the fact that we have our own generation and you look at those two events. Well, Jeff and crew were generating during that anomaly that showed the day ahead market going to $91 per megawatt hour. And what that means is that's the average for the year. So I ran some numbers. So if that's the average for the year and we had a 3-week event. I think it was actually only 2 weeks, but a 3-week event. The actual 3-week event, the day ahead market would have to be almost $700 a megawatt hour. So that's what we would have been paying had we not had the ability to generate. And I think our contracts also floated up, right? Because we're all familiar with the PCA. As their fuel prices go up, they pass it along to us. So we're not protected that way either. So running the numbers, so Jeff's team is able to run about $200 per megawatt hour for diesel, which they did at the time, 120 megawatt hours for natural gas. So just looking at it, saying, okay, well, what did we actually do? So if you look at running 200 megawatt hour for 3 weeks versus the 700, it comes out, and then you plug in that rate for us, it'd be like $59 or $60 versus 91. Now you look at the 11 years, and we're about 8% cheaper.
The open market is, or our contracts?
All the open market with our and then just using our generator in those 3 weeks, we would be less for 11 years.
Right.
So to me, that, that's running 100% open market, and we're looking at 20%. So it has to be a much bigger swing, and we still have the insurance policy of our generation capability. That's why we have it, to give us the capability to be a little more risky, and to know if the market goes crazy and we rely 20% of it on there, we fire up and run, because it's saving us money. So hopefully that gave you an idea of, what the real risk is, or compared to what we did the last 11 years, and, what we're proposing with, 1.5 megawatt contract instead of 2. Questions?
Any other council discussion?
If we didn't get any municipal solar in the future, would we still be okay with the 1.5?
That's a great question. With additional two, I think we need an additional 2 to get us to the capacity number in 2029. Now, they've been very conservative of those gray boxes and how much our accredited capacity is going to drop. So, conservative meaning worst case scenario. So if they don't drop as fast, then we might not need as much solar. But the way we ran the numbers, with their numbers, would need 2 to have basically net zero at 2029 on the forecasted capacity. That's going to change too, right? I mean, our energy requirements may change as well. These are all forecasts. So worst case scenario is we miss it. We have to buy more on the open market than we thought from an energy perspective. And we see where that's not as large a risk as I think we all feared at the beginning. Does that answer your question, Jay?
Yeah, and I guess another one is with the municipal solar, we're not even in the planning phases of that, correct? Or are we?
Well, I think it's on the agenda for the next.
We have a work session next week for it, and then we'll start putting it on the agenda thereafter.
I think we're going to start, trying to get past this thing, and then we start having the conversation about community solar. Yeah.
Okay.
But all the options are still on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only difference is, even if you, like Scott said, even if you went no community solar, then you're just buying more on the open market, and then maybe some.
Probably, I think it's about 10% more that you'd be, instead of 20, you'd be at 30%.
Just doesn't tie our hands as much as what GRDA has in the last 20 years.
I've had that concern too, because we haven't even started the planning phase for the solar.
Yeah.
But knowing that the open market's not as risky.
It hasn't been.
As we had originally thought. And thank you. This is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, good job, Scott.
Yeah.
And if we buy a new generator, then that would.
Yep. That's the other thing is, where does that fit in the whole solar capacity? When would that come online? How big would it be? And then you'd have a new capacity number to add. Yeah, that's the other.
It wouldn't make having solar that big a deal if we had a
it'd be
generator.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because then your capacity is covered on the new generator, and you're buying the energy off of it.
My only concern was I don't want to tie our hands to where we have to go do solar, even if that's not the best option in the future for us. But if, with only taking the 1.5, but
Yeah, you'd have to buy more open market energy.
Mhm.
You would have to probably have to buy some capacity out in the future years if the worst case scenario, or we didn't add another generator
Mhm.
in that time frame. So you got
Yeah.
two things to watch.
Yep.
Any other council discussions, questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve a contract with GRDA for 1.5 megawatt hours of baseload power for 25 years.
Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is the city lake discussion. So that's, we will have Jason, I think, come up here and present his findings on the engineering side.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Kind of a weird echo here with the microphone. So, yeah, I'm Jason Hoskinson, engineer with BG Consultants in Lawrence, and a few months ago, I had a conversation with Glenn that the City Lake topic was coming up, and I was asked here just recently that if I could take an initial look, a kind of a higher level look at kind of an engineering side of dealing with dam improvements and how you would address this. So I provided a memo in your packet. I'm just going to kind of hit some highlights here and then be happy to answer the questions you might have. Some initial research, and again, I haven't gone into great detail here, but just trying to collect some data that's out there on this and using my experience on other similar projects. You've got your City Lake Dam is about 100 years old. It does have a Division of Water Resources number, a DWR number, so it is a permitted structure by that agency. They have jurisdiction over it, or jurisdiction over whatever you want to do with it, I should say. So, typical projects or typical dams that I've run into that are of this range. Usually we're looking at replacing any kind of pipes or dealing with pipes through the structure, as well as grading on the slopes, trying to fix the upstream slope from any kind of wave erosion, some of that kind of thing happening. And then your auxiliary spillway, which would be, for the city lake, that would be on the west side of the lake that drains out. Basically, when you have your toad strangler, the big rainfall, that's what's protecting the dam, the size of that auxiliary spillway. So I put some numbers to this based on what I've been seeing on some recent similar projects and what we've been budgeting for other clients kind of in a similar boat that you're in. And these are by no means a bid or anything like that. It's a high level initial starting point for a budget. Some of the components like the spillway pipe and water supply infrastructure. If we get into this and find out when that was decommissioned from a water supply that there may not be as much work there, you just don't have to spend the money there. You don't have to do that type of work. But generally speaking, I would recommend budgeting somewhere in a $500,000 to $700,000 range for a project to really improve the City Lake Dam. And that takes you from start to finish all the way through construction. And so, as I mentioned previously, it is a water structure that DWR recognizes. So they have some rules and regulations that we have to go through. It has to be designed to certain standards. We have to go through that permitting process. The Corps of Engineers would be involved as well. There's also water rights components that get involved with this. Yeah, and so getting through that process and to a point where you're ready to construct it takes about a year or so. It's the highlights I wanted to share with you at least tonight at a higher level. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have related to the City Lake Dam.
Anybody have any questions for Jason?
I think anticipating some questions, do you think this is the minimum acceptable, permittable project? In other words, is there anything less to be done here, still get permits from all those four agencies, but maybe not at this level.
Well, yes, possibly. It depends on what the overall goals of the community are, what you want. Um, Typically, when DWR permits a project, they're going to want to see you bring everything into compliance with current day standards, period. Doesn't mean they're going to hold you to that. There are some processes you can go through and say, well, if this component that you want me to fix is not a detriment or a hazard to the public, then we don't need to touch it. We can be okay, and we can just focus on other components. So, but really getting into it, going through a maybe like an initial process of let's see, how does it perform to current standards? What do we want to do to it? And then approach DWR and say, hey, we want to do only this. What do you think? That could be an option.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Jason at this time? All right, I'm sure we'll have some here in a bit.
I have one. So that lake is maybe, I don't know, 3 acres as far as what is the, you said it depended on the size of the lake
So,
for the dredging portion.
for the dredging portion.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because that's going to be required. It's 3 feet deep right now. Let's just go ahead and talk about that before we get into it. So what would that be in addition to this ballpark?
That I don't know. We'd have to reach out to some local contractors that may have a site or maybe have a site that you can dispose of the material. It does need to be removed and disposed of in a certain process, so you're not contaminating other downstream sources. And but certainly, when you're doing a project to the dam, that would be an opportune time to do it. So.
Any other questions right now? We'll have some here in a bit.
Okay,
Thanks, Jake.
no problem. I'll be here.
All right, next public comment. I do have 3 people signed up, but you've kind of taken the lead, so I'll let you speak first.
That's hard to follow. As you know from previous meetings, Scott had asked me to find the lake. Oh, I've got to tell my name first, right? Becky McMillan, 1102 Dearborn. Scott had asked me to find out if the lake would still be used if the spillway was repaired. And I had my own answers, but I found answers that may surprise you much as they surprised me. We had a meeting at the library where over 100 people attended. And thank you to our mayor who came to the meeting, stayed throughout the entire discussion, and answered questions from the audience until the last person left. The Kansas History Room of our library is gathering stories and photos of the lake because we believe the history needs to be preserved. Family reunions, the use and services of the Boys and Girl Scouts over the years, and fishing tales could fill a whole section of the library. Mary Jardin had joined us on Facebook with a site called Spring Creek Lake. It's a beautiful historical photo of her family from the history of the lake, beginning with the brickyard. At the meeting, a young family came with 2 children. They came up to me at the meeting to tell me they had just recently moved to Baldwin and had found the lake. And they were going to that lake at least twice a week to play and to explore. We had paper petitions available to sign after the meeting. And Sam Richards, a young man in the audience, asked if they would be available online. And I told him I was old and didn't know how to do it. And so he's volunteered, and I am so thankful. And I very much appreciate that. And the following that I'm going to give you this evening are just quotes from the people who signed the petitions about why they love the city lake. First and foremost, these are all just the quotes. The citizens of Baldwin City and the surrounding area feel it is important to protect our natural resources and its important history of our community. This lake and its surrounding lands have many multiple uses. Another said it's quiet, safe for young children to play with their families, a place to let your dog run and walk and bike, and continue to have family reunions. It is a treasure of value beyond money. Another quote stated, "My grandpa, dad, and me, and now my kids have learned to love fishing there. And next, we need to protect green spaces that our community created many years ago. This is a place of serene peace. Another person said, I love not only the lake, but the open prairie field where we can fly kites. The prairie is especially beautiful when it's in full bloom, right before it's mowed. And another said, I love to just sit on the dock and chill. Another said, I like to read at the lake. Another said, I want others to have the same opportunity that I did to interact with nature. A woman told me that we have members of our families whose ashes have been scattered there. That surprised me. But there were several more that told me the same thing. And then another said, my aunt was married there. We celebrated Mother's Day at the lake. We had a funeral there. A local recover group has an annual event there for the last 25 years, and over 30 to 60 people attend. One family said, we like to do casting of animal tracks at the lake. We found out that the Frisbee golf course is used a lot. A young man said, our disc golf group from Lawrence have tournaments at the Baldwin City Lake. It is unique and one of our favorite courses for events. This could also be promoted by Baldwin City Recreation. Gravel bike groups ride out there. Several photographers mentioned, I go there to photograph the birds and the other wildlife. There's kayaking, canoeing, and boat and paddleboarding. It is better at Baldwin City Lake than lakes where there's big motorboats. Many people love to fish there and would again if the spillway is fixed. There are 4 classes of Baker University students who use this lake for studies and projects on a regular basis, and they have for years, and they still are continuing to do this. Artists like to set up their easels at the lake to capture scenery and wildlife. Boys and Girl Scout troops will continue to use the lake if the spillway is restored. And another person said, we need to protect this green space the community created so many years ago and restore it to its former use. And at last, the person said, peace and serenity are still of value in our community. Then there were several people who wanted to find out online how people, what they would do, what they would like the lake to be, that they needed just a few things changed. And it wasn't big items. They did want it dredged and the spillway restored. Those were the 2 main things. But they also would like the path restored that is walking, that where you walk around the entire lake. We did that this past Sunday, Danny and I, and it's still doable. There's a lot of footpaths that are in perfect condition. They are still there. I was a little leery on one of them, but it made it. And then we got to where there were the signs for Catherine Kelly and Patsy Sanders, and there's where the bridge was down. It had been vandalized, and then it was rebuilt by Sam, who I met before, and some other Eagle Scouts and different people in the troop. And they had made one out of metal this time. And that was the one that also went down when the spillway did with the big rain in 2019 or 17. We're not sure exactly where that happened. So we would love to have that path so you could walk all the way around. It's a lot of fun, and families love to do that. And then we crossed on the other side of the lake and went down a ditch and crossed over another bridge. And there's another Catherine Kelly trail there and a big sign. So all those signs were just like they were done yesterday. They're perfect. And it's not hard walking, and it's great. And as we were there, we saw in the field, there were 2 people playing disc golf and their dog was running along with them. It was a beautiful day Sunday. And we saw at least 8 people, and you think there's nobody out there. This was just an hour or 2 of the afternoon. The disc golf does need to be maintained, and the pads laid for people who use them on a regular basis. Horseshoes and cornhole spaces would be very simple, inexpensive, fun activities to add. They need to be promoted by Baldwin City Recreation and perhaps used for our own disc golf tournaments instead of people coming from Lawrence to have their tournament. We need fishing clinics, horseshoe tournaments, and so on, and those wouldn't be costly. The people who answered did not want this lake changed to include ballparks, soccer fields, and other activities. That would change the way the lake is used and appreciated as a place to enjoy nature peacefully. Now we want to give you a few names. We have about 1,000. We won't make you read them all tonight. And Sam has some, and then Christopher. And I don't think the others were brought by you. I don't see Megan. There's another lady who had collected some. So let's see, we'll go ahead and give them to Amber. And these are people who, a lot of them do live in Baldwin yet, but there's many that are from here that come back, that don't live here anymore. And they do come back though to see their parents or their children or whoever, and they would like the lake to be there again. And then there are some who have moved away and come back. So not everything is Baldwin right there. But anyway, I want you to look at these names and realize that people believe in our lake, and even more, they believe in saving all the open spaces around the lake. They have offered their opinions on how it could be saved by maybe grants and preservation groups, and are willing to be on a committee to help the answers for our community. We feel we did not have a saying in how this could be saved. I mean, you've asked me to look at it, but maybe we could talk together about what in the world, because it's so important. And now we're being presented with a possible tax increase that might be the hardest on the very people who enjoy the use of the lake. Young people need a place for recreation, the older people who enjoy the peace of a natural setting. This is a small community. We're not a big city. We can't compete with what is offered by larger cities. And we have a treasure that we need and want to keep. We can't afford a higher sales tax that would hurt the residents who are already concerned about higher property taxes in a small community with a lack of affordable housing and not many amenities to offer except our lake. It's one activity that they can go out and use. And that's all for now. And I thank you for the opportunity to study all this. And I've met so many people, and it's been such fun. I really appreciate that opportunity. And the rest is up to you. Please don't let our community down by plunging into a contract that's more than our city budget can afford without looking at all the various further options that are available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky.
Now, Stan.
Good evening. My name is Sam Richards, located at 1220 Elm Street. I'm going to speak more directly in opposition of the potential threat of selling the Baldwin City Lake to private developers. The document that I've handed to the council are the results of the online petition that was developed as a supplement to Becky McMillan's form to help reach a broader audience, those who may not have the opportunity to contact Becky in person. 464 signatures, 347 of which are residents of Baldwin City, many of whom opted to provide personal statements describing their desire to preserve the Baldwin City Lake as a city property. The social and environmental benefits of urban green spaces are well documented, as well as the physical and mental benefits they offer to their users. Through the writings of our community members in this petition, it is evident that this lake and our city are no exception. The relevance of the Baldwin City Lake is not limited to its historical significance, a course frequented by disc golfers, the site of annual campouts for our local scouting troops, a backdrop for artists, a tool for education, or a haven for families seeking to engage with the outdoors. We must look at these benefits collectively, the importance that the lake holds for generations, and not succumb to the idea of prioritizing short-term gain over long-term investment. The retention of the old lake as a community property would demonstrate the value we place on the importance of our heritage and history as a city, the responsibility we feel as stewards in the conservation of our limited public green spaces, and demonstrate a commitment we hold to the well-being and the health of the citizens of Baldwin City. If financial limitations are the reason infrastructure needs have gone unmet, such as dredging the lake's bottom and reconstruction of the spillway, then we as a community should decide whether or not to pursue those improvements. To rationalize the sale of the lake due to costs associated with improvements creates a false dilemma. Dredged or not, or 2 feet lower than historic depths, foregoing improvements to the property does not deprive the area of the many services it provides, including habitat for wildlife and a space for recreation. I believe the potential sale of the Baldwin City Lake to be short-sighted. The economic benefits would be brief, but the sting of compromising a cornerstone of our town and selling off to the highest bidder would persist. It is important to state that once a green space is sold for private development, it is lost forever. At what point does monetary gain outweigh the benefits the Baldwin City Lakes provides to us as a community? Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher? Oh, okay.
I'm Dan McMillan, 1102 Dearborn Street. Got that right. Jason answered a little bit of my questions as he explained this. I figured they were bloated figures, and that's what I understand them as, bloated figures. That problem out there could be fixed much cheaper than all these figures that has been presented to you. I mean, Glenn Rockers and I was out there, and Glenn had excellent ideas how to fix that. And if you want to get engineering done, that's fine. But let's don't pay exorbitant fees to some contractor that jacks it up because it's a federal deal or a whatever. I mean, it's just not, it's just can be done cheaper than all these figures that he gave you. And I'm not real in favor of a city sales tax again. I think you've already taxed the community to its fullest. And I don't know why you haven't went and got some kind of grant money. It's been 6 years since that lake was in this condition, and you could have got FEMA money way back there when all the disaster in Douglas County was going on, and the city never did do it. And it would have been fixed by now. But as I said, I'm against a sales tax. You've already got 1.25 sales tax. You're wanting to add another quarter. And I think that you're probably trying to catch up with the sales tax mess up when you did the brick streets. So you have a 1.5% sales tax. And when you state it in your sales tax resolution, you use the lake as the main thing, but you got the other little lines as resources. And that's about all I've got to say about that. And please do not sell the lake. And I would like to introduce Christopher O'Neill. He has some very good research that he came up with, and I commend this man going straight to the horse's mouth and getting the information.
Yeah.
My name's Christopher O'Neill. I live on Santa Fe Drive, 134. I had seen the sales tax proposed increase for the cost of the lake. I have contacted the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the division, the water division, to ask exactly what we need. If we need a new pipe, we need the infrastructure removed, we need the dirt on top of the dam, and those are all things that are not required for us to do. Granted, some cities and lakes have probably needed that. The drain pipe, if it's broken, the engineer at DWR said we don't need that, because it's a low water dam. it can be concreted in. The dam itself has no damage to it. There's no holes in it. There's no trees growing through it. It's been well maintained. It doesn't need to be covered with dirt. These are things that are proposed for tax increase, and they're literally based on my experience of many other water structures. I think that the city needs to hire an actual engineer to come in and see the actual cost of the auxiliary spillway replacement. It's exactly 50 feet long. It's 3 foot by 3 foot. That's 50 yards of concrete delivered. That's $7,500, not 250,000. Granted, we need concrete and forms and some labor to do it. We need an engineer to draw it. And we have to submit those drawings to the Army Corps of Engineers, which would be perfectly fine with it. We're not raising the water level upstream. We are going with the current, what was already established. There's a lot of ifs and maybes. We don't need dirt on the dam. We don't need the water pipe infrastructure taken out. We don't need the main pipe replaced. There's all kinds of expenses in this proposal for a tax increase that are unnecessary by the Army Corps of Engineers and the DWR engineer himself. Mr. Ambrose from the department spoke with him today. He was looking at the blueprints. He said we had other options available to us. For instance, lowering the spillway by 2 foot would take us out of all DWR regulations. If we had a 1 foot spillway and then dredged behind it, of course, it requires a permit. We would have to have a study done, and that study is a breach analysis inundation map. Basically, it says that any water that the lake retains during a flood, if it comes out, it's not washing anybody's home away downstream. We know that's not the case. So I propose that there be more research done before we vote a tax increase on unnecessary expenses. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kenny Niehoff.
Kenny Niehoff, 504 Grove Street. And I believe one thing that Chris didn't mention is the permit from the DWR. It costs nothing.
Same with the Corps of Engineers.
When you talk to them today, it's $0 permits. I appreciate Jason coming this evening. I appreciate the report that he took his time to put together for us and everything. I actually work for a very similar firm just like that, and I'm an estimator for them, and I put these reports together every day. So that's what I do for a living. So I realize that we aren't building Farmer Joe's pond here, but in reality, there isn't much difference between the two. There are plenty of farm ponds that are getting built around Douglas County for a whole lot less than what it would cost to have an engineering firm build one. They're built up to code and have a civil engineer sign off on them, just like the one that an engineering firm would build. It would just be done at a fraction of the cost. I know because, like I said, I worked for one of those overpriced engineering firms, and I would never recommend to one of my friends who's going to build something like this to hire us to do it. We are creating our own problems here. I mean, this is a city property that has to follow our own rules. So we're writing those rules. So you as the city council are the ones that make these rules. So why do we need to make rules to force ourselves to use an engineering firm to begin with? Is there any reason we can't, as a city, just put out a public notice to get a minimum of 3 bids from local contractors who would be required to meet all the minimum standards, meet the DWR standards, and meet all the KDHE requirements, everything there. I'm pretty sure that all those guys that are building these local farm ponds and have been doing so for 30 years will be able to have a good proposal that meet all our needs at a very small fraction of the price of a big firm. If we make it a public notice with public bids, require the plans to have the civil engineer stamp on it, what are we missing? I mean, is it a bylaw that we are trying to satisfy? I just feel like we are putting our own barriers up to trip ourselves. I mentioned the last time I spoke here regarding this issue that, and I also mentioned it to the mayor at the library when we were signing the petitions, that there are a couple of grants available, and I am volunteering to fill out the application. It's an annual process. It needs to be done by late October. One of them is the Watershed Public Project Funding Grant. It's RAPS is the acronym for it. That is looking for projects between 50,000 and 500,000. And this may not even cost that much, but I feel like we could get one of these fairly easily that would pay for most of the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff, you leave? Van Dusen? Hopefully you signed to speak. Do you want to still speak? Okay. That's all on my list. Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item?
Can I speak from here?
Absolutely.
I'm Glenn Rockers. I grew up, born and raised in this town. Well, I used to swim in the old lake when I was a kid. But Dad took me fishing when I was a little boy. And I'm 83 years old, so that's how long I've been dealing with that lake. First of all, it was built in the 20s by the WPA, same people that built Lone Star Lake. And it was built for water supply for the Baldwin City. And it acted as water supply plus wells they drill, and I'm saying this because two people, but they drilled wells in all of the adjoining farms, and that supplied water to the city of Baldwin until late 70s, early 80s when they hooked onto the pipeline. And that's when Baldwin had 2,500 people, but it worked. In so it was built in the 20s. The dam had no work done on it until the early to mid 1960s. And I, as an excavating contractor, went out and I raised that dam. And because of the shallowness of the pond. And it is a pond, it's not a lake. Not in these terms. But so we did that because to raise the water level. And the spillway was an old sand rock spill. Never had anything done to it. And I looked at the thing the other day, and you'll think I'm loud enough. I looked at it the other day, and the dam was just as good a shape as it was when we fixed it in the 1960s. It's probably got some muskrat holes in the front of it, but they're not clear through. The city could go out there with their backhoe in a half a day and fix every muskrat hole there is at it. And the dam, the spillway washed out 6-7 years ago when we had that 13-inch rain. And so it's been that way ever since then. Well, in the 1960s, the city actually raised that about 2 feet, poured a concrete wall on top of the sand rock. Well, back then they didn't pier it, they didn't do it right. You could go in there today and pier that sand rock and pour it a 2 foot or whatever. I can go out and survey it for you for nothing and tell you how high that spillway could be based on the height of the dam. Let's say I've done this for 60 years. I've built ponds 5 times bigger than that. And I'm still calling it a pond, call it a lake. But anyway, it is shallow. But the thing is never, back then it was never deep. They didn't, back in those days, they didn't deepen the whole water area. Okay, so the upper end of that pond is never at any depth to it. The siltation in it can't be all that bad because it's a, the only farm ground that drains on it is on my property, and it's all terraced. But the water, the runoff on that starts at the Heritage Tractor parking lot. That is the upper edge of the water that runs into that, and it runs across my farm and then across the model farm to the south of me. It's all grass except for mine, but mine's protected. And so the Division of Water Resources won't get involved unless it's over 350 acres. And that's way less than that. There's a little comes in from the east where Corey his family used to live. A little comes in that way, but the to raise that 2 feet, you're going to have ample supply of water and so on for a good fishing pond. And that's all it's ever been. Now that the city doesn't use it for water, it's never been dredged out. It never was deep. The upper end was never deep. So and I can tell you how to get rid of that moss on the upper end. There's a chemical you put on it, doesn't hurt the fish or anything. I use it on my own ponds. So people holler about the moss. It's treatable. It's treatable. So my question is, why does it have to have all this dredging and all this stuff done to it? Why can't you just fix it back like it was before we got that big rain? The pipe, I don't know what the pipe is that people are talking about. There's no overflow pipe in the dam. It's all out of that spillway on the west side. Unless you're talking about the pipe for the driveway is bad. The driveway could be fixed by the city. I mean, they got a brand new backhoe. You go in there and you dig it out, level it out, put PVC pipe in it instead of metal, and it's a simple thing to do. It's just something the city could do if they, if you guys so ordered them to do it and they had time to do it. And we're not talking about anything major. And then you can get local concrete. There's several local concrete people around here that can pier that and fix that spillway. And that's all it needs. And for not knocking your engineer, but for the cost of engineering that, you can fix it probably for less than what they're going to charge you to do the engineering on it. I see why you don't need engineering. You don't need any permit. I mean, you're not changing anything. You're just putting it back like it was. Division of Water Resources has nothing to say about it. I guarantee you. I know them well. And yeah, all you're doing is, yeah, if you were going to build the dam up 5 feet higher and all of that, then you got to go through. Then you get into the permit and so on. You're just putting it back the way it was. It was just it's simple. It's such a simple thing. And I've heard rumors and about selling it. Why would you want to sell it? What would you do with the money? It's a heritage to the city. I know a lot of people that's just moved in from out of town probably don't even know where it's at. But if they would go out there and look at it, the city is doing a great job of mowing it, and I'll commend them on that. The place is cleaned up, it looks nice, and if the people would go out there and start using it, you can have a nice family picnic out there. It's a perfect pond for kids to go fishing in because it is shallow. I mean, and it's clear water. It's all spring fed, and that's why you got such a moss problem because it's clear water. Moss don't grow in dirty water. So it's a perfect opportunity for the people to use it if they would use it. And like say, half of them probably don't even know about it. But it's a heritage of the city, and to get rid of it would be a huge mistake. I think so. And like I say, to put it back the way it was, to fix that that bridge under the driveway is I mean, a short day's work out there with the city backhoe and put a couple of 20-inch PVC, and I'm talking PVC, not this black stuff like you see going in all around. PVC. It'll last forever, uh, and it won't rot out, and it'll never in any of our lifetimes in here. Well, mine's about over with anyway, but it'll never have to repair that again.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? Yep.
So I used to fish out there years ago, probably 30 or 40 years ago with my uncle. It was 6 feet deep then, and we caught great fish. And the water was clear. I agree with Glenn. I looked at the spillway the other day. I was out there, and it's solid sand rock. So the thing they had built on top of there just washed right off the sand rock, and it's laying there. And it looks to be about 3 feet of height in total, but it had stepping stones. It was kind of like the castle turret. You had stepping stones you could go across. That's where the Boy Scouts would walk across to go camping after their ceremonies on the other side of the lake. So it was kind of cool. But anyway, I just wanted to say it's never, in my history, it's never been a deep lake. And I think it would be an easy fix to pier the sandstone, like Glenn was saying. I mean, I'm not a pond builder, but by looking at it, that's the exact thing I was thinking. It needs to be piered in a concrete wall, and you're pretty much done. It's easy. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item?
My name's Ron Wright, and I live at 903 10th Street, and I don't know anything about what it's going to take to fix, but I defer to Glenn over there because he built pond for me, and he put flags around where that water line was going to be, and that's right where it was. And so he's been building ponds for years, and you want an authority on that, go to him. But I just want to say my experiences with the lake is, and I'm 83 years old also. So I went out there as a child. They actually had a shelter house out there, kind of screened in, and we had family reunions almost out there. And I know people have learned to swim there. I know for a fact that more than one person has been baptized in that pond, if that means anything. And I just wanted to relate my personal experiences that I've always enjoyed that lake and have fished there and just picnic there and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak to this agenda? Yes, sir.
My name's Levi Parkin. I live at 804 Baker. And I actually just wanted to take a moment to speak to value. We listened to Dr. Boyd this evening and his wonderful summation of our urban forest and the value it offers. He talked about the monetary value as well as the intrinsic value of our trees. So I'm an arborist, and I will say, as an industry, we find a need to put a financial value on things because humans, especially in a capitalist society, find the ability to find other value in anything besides monetary far too abstract, it would seem. We can't calculate the value to woodpeckers, as Dr. Boyd mentioned. We can't calculate the value to Pholios lichen, to tardigrades, to hackberry emperor butterfly, to red squirrels or chanterelles, because they don't put a dollar sign in the value of trees. We're here right now, we're discussing a part of our community that holds great value to families, to disc golfers, to fishermen, to bird watchers, to naturalists. It holds value to meadowlarks, to black-capped chickadees, nuthatch, brown creepers. It holds value to gray blue heron, to red and gray squirrels, to beavers. It holds value to the blackjack oaks that stand there, to the sugar maples, to the black cherries. And it holds value for me and my son. And as my family moved here 5 years ago, when my son was 1 year old. And we've been going there ever since. And actually, the little area just below the auxiliary spillway, my son affectionately refers to as his cave. And I remember one particular morning setting in his cave, and it was in early spring, and watching a throuple of eastern bluebird tussle in the cedar across the way. And we watched a little flock of ducks land on the lake above the spillway. There's a lot more value to that lake than what it could ever be sold for, or what anybody could ever personally gain from the sale of that. It holds value in this community that is ingrained for 80 plus years, for 100 years. And I think it would be an atrocity to consider selling it or really doing anything beyond it, keeping it as a valued part of our community. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item?
I'm Mary Skaggs, and I'm officially not in the city proper, 1824 North 300 Road. But I just want to speak to all of us who are part of the community. My husband and I went to Baker. We met each other there many, many years ago. We've got fond memories of the lake. I took my girls out there for Girl Scouts. I know Susan Butel did too. She was a big part of this community. And again, I'm just up here to speak for the people that are outside of the city limits, because all of our children are scattered all over the United States, all over the world. I can speak to that. I have a daughter in the Netherlands. This is just a precious spot with a lot of community memories, that have promoted community values. So, and when Ron and I got married, we chose to come back to Baldwin, and very consciously wanted this to be the place we raised our 4 children, and it was wonderful. It's just great. So that's just a voice from, thank you for listening, for somebody who's not officially a Baldwin City member. I think I am, but I'm not.
You are.
Thank you. Anybody else? Roger.
Roger Boyd, 510 3rd Street. I feel compelled to talk about this. Like Glenn, I've been at that lake my entire life. It was my harebrained idea to put the concrete in the spillway. And to tell you how easy it is, it was done by a couple of dozen Boy Scouts, aged 11 to 18, and me. We put in the forms. We didn't know about peering very well. Bob Hay, I think, loaned us an auger that we probably put in rebar about 6 to 8 inches deep in the sand. So that was our idea of peering. Otherwise, it might have still been there. But we did it ourselves. It was easy to do, and it lasted for about 20 years. So it's not too difficult to do.
Thank you, Roger. Anybody else?
Oh, come on, everybody.
All right. With that, we'll close public comment, open it up to council discussion.
Yeah, I agree. I think the conversations with the Army Corps of Engineers and the water authorities should be a part of this discussion. I think the initial reaction was just to see what an actual formal bid would be and to go from there. And so here we are. I think just having that bigger conversation about what our options are and getting in contact. I appreciate, Chris, you've taken the initiative to do that. And I think it's incumbent on the city to do the same. And kind of now that we have our answer of what kind of numbers it would look like for a formal engineered project, to look at other options.
Yeah, and I guess I want to add to that this was only an engineer estimate. We didn't send it out to bid for contractors to bid on. This was the city reaching out to BG and saying, "Hey, take a look at this and see what you think that based on your experience and everything that this would cost." So just so we could get more data. Same thing with the sales tax. I know some commenters have discussed on that a little bit, and I know that's the next agenda item. Not intending any formal action, but the sales tax was one thing that was discussed, or talked about or mentioned. So we put it on here just so we could start the discussion of how would we finance something like this if this came to fruition, if the city wanted to move forward with something, how do we do that? So this is kind of how we have to do that on the council level so that the council can get all the information that any city staff is getting or seeing, to do something like that. So
Yeah, it's kind of I agree. Restoring it to its initial or original state is very exciting, and I think at the very minimum should be done. I I personally was a little bit more excited to hopefully get more people out there and program it a little bit more. Maybe build some nicer shelters, more permanent structures. I know you used to be able to rent out a cabin at City Hall that used to be out there and go stay out for the weekend. I think that's a really cool thing. That's kind of where my imagination kind of ran. So restoring it to its initial state or natural state or whatever everyone remembers it as, I think is the minimum. But I mean, I personally, one of five, would like to see even more invested out there, and get more people out there. We all say, well, it's in disarray, and look what we have. What's the city's fault that it's in disarray? I think that needs to be said, and if it is restored to what we all remember it as, it would definitely be a lot more trafficked, and maybe beyond if we can even make it more enticing.
well, and I want to add to this. I want to thank you for having your meeting. I did go to that, did listen to everybody, talked to numerous people afterwards, during, and everything in between. And it was brought up, and I agree with it, that with this discussion, I was kind of waiting for tonight to where we had your guys' input after it was kind of discussed in the winter. Spring's coming, I promise, this week. And then after we had BG's engineering estimate, just to see what we're kind of looking at, what we could potentially be looking at, as well as some funding opportunities, to do the same thing that we did with this building, which was form a committee that is made up of community members as well as council members, and start discussing different ideas, options, what other amenities we could add that may attract a larger population out there. So that's kind of part of the process here. This is just the kind of the initial introduced in the winter, but this is kind of the first step to getting to that process to see, what can be done, how we're going to finance it, and all that fun stuff. So anyways.
I'd just like to, since I asked the question to Becky, I just want to thank you for answering it so eloquently and completely. I think you did a great job, everybody here. That's really what, we brought it up as an option as we're looking at increasing solar. we really didn't hear any of this, right? People were using it. You just didn't know. So you had to ask the question if you're making those big decisions. It wasn't a sneak attack. It was just, hey, this is an option. Well, you said bad option. Let me show you why.
Loud and clear.
So I appreciate that. And that's what this process is all about, right? Is we base things and questions on things we know, information we have. You brought new information. So in my opinion, I think it's clear that it certainly isn't a green space that we really want to give up. Now, whether we improve it, to what level we improve it, I mean, one of the options is just to keep doing what we're doing, right? It's being used. It's not what it could be. But I think, in my personal opinion, selling it and or using it for solar doesn't really make sense based on everything I've heard and other options that we have. And that's just my opinion. There's 4 others here that count, but I think that was the biggest concern that started all this. So I think, to your point, and to the point Jason brought up, is we've got to pick something. You can't cost something out until you have what it is that you want it to be. And lake depth, those types of things, amenities, and it may be a timeline of things. So I think, to your point, it's a great idea is put the committee together that everybody has input into and figure out what, within reason. You've always got to consider the fact that whatever we do is going to cost, and it's the public's money. So we got to be careful with it. But I think that group needs to come back with, just like you did at the community centers, this is what we would like to shoot for. And it changed a couple of times based on cost and things. Things were omitted.
Yeah.
But you got to start there and have that vision, and then be prepared to figure out what can we afford, how are we going to afford it. And I think the sales tax was brought up because that's one avenue to do that. And I know there's heartburn about how they're worded, but they're never specifically worded about a single project. You have to leave it open to do other things. And I would only support a sales tax that would be sunsetted after whatever it is, is decided to spend it on is done, is complete, right? So it would end. And so we just got to figure out ways to afford what it is that this community wants. So we need the community input. We need to have a plan, and then we can start going out and getting bids, right? Engineering, all that. But we're kind of shooting in the dark right now with what that is. So again, thank you for bringing forth, everything that you did, and everybody else here as well. I appreciate it.
I wanted to tell everybody thank you very much. I've enjoyed hearing all the stories. It's actually been a really enjoyable city council meeting for me.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And it made us understand the value of this lake. Obviously means a lot to this community. So I think doing our due diligence and forming a committee is a great path. What's the drop dead latest date for sales tax on a November ballot, so we know what kind of timeline?
If you did it for November, I believe it's 60 days prior, 60 or 90.
They prefer 90.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sales tax would just be one option that we would be looking at among other funding mechanisms,
Yeah.
correct?
Other options. Right.
Which ultimately would be on the city to vote on if it did go that direction. But I think you get a committee together and you kind of get community input and find out what you want it to look like, and then you can get a price on it. And that price can then be determined. Who do you want to fund this? How? So.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to everybody, especially all the hard work that you have done and getting all the signatures and everything. So it's really going to be something that we're going to have to really think about. And the committee, I think, is a good idea also, so that you have maybe someone from the city included in your committee to help you figure out what to do, or help all of us figure out what to do. So thank you.
So one way I did when we put together the community center, I'd like to have community members that are interested in being on the committee email me if you're interested. I tried when we put the committee for this building together. I went out and found people that were for a community center, people that were against the community center, and then a couple council members, and then people from each generation. So that way each generation can give input. So anybody listening online, if you're against it or you're for it, young or retired, does not matter. I would just ask that you reach out to me so we can start forming this committee, and putting it together and starting to kind of talk and discuss through some of these options. In the council, I mean, seems logically to me to put this in CDC if they're willing to work on this until we get to the financing part, and then we'll have to switch it over to finance at that point.
I would like to be involved also.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we'll come up with our council members. We have to kind of watch it, or I guess we can post every committee meeting and make it an open meeting as well too. So we'll figure that out. But on the community side, if you guys could just start notifying me, Becky, I know you've kind of taken the lead on that side. So happy to hear from you. Happy to give me some recommendations, and then we'll hopefully in the next 2 weeks bring that committee back to the next council meeting and go ahead and appoint that and get that ball rolling. So that way it's sooner than later. All right.
Sounds great.
Any other council discussion on this agenda item? We kind of handled the next agenda item. I'm happy to talk about it, but again, we just put this on as a placekeeper so that way the council could see what the resolution may look like and see how it'd have to be worded if it were to go to a city vote. So with that, I'll take any community comments on this agenda item. Seeing none, we'll close council or community comments, council discussion, anything on this?
Sales tax.
Yeah.
Resolution. Yeah. Way premature on that. I mean, it's going to be sales tax, property tax, or finding it in the budget from property tax and
Or grants.
or grants. That's the thing. I think that's the part where you don't want to rush it. I think trying to get to a November election, because you're going to miss a grant cycle probably. So I think the fact that there's less interest in doing anything with it, we may have to do it right. We may have to take our time and get the grant study done, figure out what those are, but you can still be figuring out what you want it to be. That's just the funding mechanism of it. So I'd hate to go to a sales tax vote when we may have some grants outstanding that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think we should hold off on these tax.
Okay.
And we've had some volunteers to help with that.
Yeah, and if I spoke with you at the meeting, we're happy to accept any filled out application for grants you can give us.
You're right. Yes.
And we will happily approve them and submit them.
Yep.
All right, with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the parking lot renewal lease. So this agenda item, this is for the parking lot that the city leases over by the depot that supports the golf course activities, cross country, 4th of July. It's kind of a spillover lot over there that we've been leasing for, I don't know, last year or two.
Is that the paved?
That's the non-paved.
So it's just south of the
Correct.
the paved.
Yep.
It's across from Ives Chapel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Exciting stuff. We talked about parking lots. Seeing none, council discussion. Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the lease agreement between the City of Baldwin City and Living Space LLC.
Second.
Moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the Rural Housing Incentive District for Maplewood Place. Glenn, I don't know anything about this.
Okay, yeah, this is the proposed RHID. We have 3 of them in progress right now that we've done, and this would be the 4th. This would be, if you look at the map, was at the tail end of this. This is down at the bottom, and you'll see it's around where the curve is there. So This is the first resolution in the process. If you remember how this goes, there's actually 2 resolutions, an ordinance, a hearing, cost benefit analysis. All this resolution does is send this off to Department of Commerce, and they need to approve it and send it back. Then you start the rest of the process, which normally takes months to do. So there's a map of it right there. I don't have all the details of what would be in there, but they're talking about duplexes in the back of that property, and then in the front it would be commercial. I don't know what kind of commercial would be there yet, but that'd be it. So we have 3 others, like I said, they're in progress right now, and they're under construction right now. So this is our incentive to incentivize affordable housing here in Baldwin City. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. This is the first step. It takes, like I said, many more steps to go through this. It's usually about a 3 to 4 month process by the time you're done with it. It is not an easy process to go through.
With that, is there any public comment to this agenda item? Seeing none, close public comment for this agenda item. Council discussion. I guess, Glenn, I have some questions on this one. Because typically for our other RID stuff, it was for improvement of utilities, road extensions, different things like that. What's this going to support, I guess? Because the utilities and roads are already...
Yeah, same thing. I haven't got anything detailed yet, because what'll happen is once you get this off, then you get that information for the second resolution and also for the hearing, and then eventually the ordinance. And we also do a cost benefit analysis in there to show how that would cash flow. I don't know what all their infrastructure improvements would be yet for this project. I don't even know what the total cost of it would be yet.
Because my understanding is this is the same project that they received a grant from the state.
Yeah, I believe this is a 3rd try on that. We did get the moderate housing income grant on that, which we got announced a couple meetings back. So this would be working together with that.
Does the developer have to use the funds for infrastructure? I don't think they do.
Typically, that's what it's used for.
Typically, but I don't think they're required to.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, it comes down to the development agreement, because what has to happen is what they get back has to be on that agreement, has to be actually eligible for that repayment under the RID. So you can't just throw
pick a number and
you can't do that. It has to be an eligible cost, and we have to approve that.
Right.
But that comes much later. That's kind of the tail end of the process.
So I guess, I'll say it. I have mixed feelings. I've been a big proponent of RID. I think RID was necessary for us to grow and continue to grow and bring development. If we're not growing as a city, cost of living is going up for everybody that is currently living here. So I think RID's a good thing. I think where I guess hesitate a little bit on this is not understanding what the purpose of RID is when we do have NRP already in place. But also the fact that they did get grants already from the state. I have questions. I'm not going to lie on this project, just because I guess we can go through the resolution and find out the rest. It's kind of what it feels like, I guess, is we're having to approve the resolution to find out the rest of the information.
Sure, and that's really how the other ones also went. It's really no different than the other 3.
But the other 3 was infrastructure. That was pretty clear. They were taking a blank piece of land, extending infrastructure to it, and bringing different types of housing. So, okay.
So for us to know exactly what's going there, we would have to approve this and then go to the second step.
Correct. And then also the third and all the way through the final steps. Yeah.
So really, there wouldn't be a lot of harm in approving this until we see.
Correct. It doesn't
what their plans are.
Yeah, it doesn't commit you to anything until you do the final ordinance on this after a pretty lengthy process and hearing and all that. So it comes back a number of times. You'll probably get tired of listening about it, but that's the way it goes. There's no way to get this through quickly. There's no way to do a RID quickly. And I think that's by design. So it's a slow moving process. So with this kicks it off. So then the Department of Commerce can look at it and say, yeah, you meet the requirements, and they send it back, and then you can start.
And if I remember correctly, this also has to be approved by the school district and the county.
Correct.
Well,
Not the resolution.
what happens is they can
No, the final-
they can veto it.
So they can
So
veto.
Right. So that's why you send the hearing notice to them, so they can come to a hearing that we did on the other three also,
Right.
and they can say, we object this, and we're not going to participate in the RID. They have the ability to do that.
Right.
So a lack of a veto is an approval.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, they have to come and voice their opinion against it.
I mean, RID. I mean, it's in the acronym. I mean, it's there to incentivize development, and we struggle with incentivizing development specifically of affordable housing. So that's why I made the comment. I was like, does it really matter what they save on? I mean, I know that it's really good for your community if you can extend your infrastructure outside, do a new piece of land, but is it problematic if you don't? I mean, don't you still complete the same objective? I mean, they could use it. I mean,
I guess my heartburn, I'm gonna clarify. I guess my heart, it's not a heartburn. It's just a lack of maybe understanding what the purpose or I mean, they got $500,000 from the state. So that's where, for the affordable housing portion of it.
Right.
This encompasses the whole entire property, which is going to have commercial and different things on the front of it and
Sure.
different things. So that's why I just don't understand what it is intended to benefit, because the affordable housing is coming. They've already gotten the grant for that. So if they don't build it, they don't get their $500,000 from the state.
Correct. I mean, is there anything in RID that says that if you accept other grant money that you are unable to?
No.
So, I mean,
I was just asking questions because we've never had a RID.
No, I know.
They've received such a large amount.
Every RID's been extending to a new annexed piece of land up to this point. It's a valid question. I'm just talking through it.
Yeah, I think seeing what the number is, what they're wanting to use RID. I mean, typically, I think a previous RID, they were used to more competitively priced lots, and drive absorption quicker.
Right.
As opposed to just making more money.
Right.
I don't know how all that goes into this, whether the grant forces them to pick, stay within some cost ranges, or if they can pick what are affordable housing's got to be some defined price, right? To meet that grant. I'm sure it's got to be
right.
So then, to Casey's point, what is this needed? Is this a make or break for this developer to pursue this?
Right.
Needing this RID grant RID money to go forward with it. Until we see what they're trying to use it for, it's hard to answer.
No, I like I said, I'm just talking through it. We've not had this type of a RID request before, so
we've had another development with RID has a commercial piece in it.
Right.
Correct.
So,
but there's normally lots involved.
Yeah,
and you're right. It's to drive
infrastructure. Yeah. So I don't think it hurts to move forward with it.
I don't think so either.
Just getting your thoughts out there early.
Yep.
Nope. Yeah. It's good.
Give everybody a fair
Yeah. I told you, I asked that a long time ago. All right. Fair enough.
All right. Any other council discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the Maplewood Place resolution creating a rural housing incentive district.
I second it.
Moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next, council committee reports, budget and finance. Scott.
I just gave my report earlier. That's what we talked about. So any,
I don't think we need one this.
Glenn, any pressing issues for Friday or no?
Oh, for finance? No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
No, 'cause we're going to have the presentation
Right.
of solar and
Yep.
everything on Tuesday. So I
Yep,
think
yep.
we're in good shape for that.
So the next budget and finance committee meeting would be on scheduled for Friday, April 4th, in honor of Shay, 7:30 in the morning. I keep extending the invitation, and I stand by the door. Is she going to make it today? And she never does.
To call an ambulance because something is wrong.
Fair enough.
To go pick you up and bring you?
That's the only way.
Do it.
All right.
Drag me out too.
Yeah.
Community development, Corey.
We have not met since last meeting. We meet March 24th, 4 o'clock, second floor, City Hall. Sounds like we're going to have some agenda items.
All right. Public safety, Susan.
We have not met. We meet next April 8th, 4 o'clock.
Public works, Julie.
Yeah, we met on the 13th, and some of this we've already covered. We talked about the RECs, whether to retire, sell, or keep them. The other thing we talked about was 3 used generators have become available. 2 are 2 megawatts, and one is a 1 to 2.5. No, one is a 2.5 megawatt. So we just really discussed about that, what would be involved, what we'd have to do to the plant to accommodate more generators. And Jeff is working on that to get all that information for us. We're still, we are still waiting for the property to close where the substation, the new one's going to be. After closing on that, we will begin scheduling the tree removal, and we need to have a plan on storage for the transformer if the pad is not ready before the transformer arrives, and that's due to be in July. Our next meeting is to be determined. I'm going to be gone during our regular time, so I'll have to get together with everybody and figure it out.
Strategic planning, Scott.
We have not had a meeting since, and I will remind everybody that our work session next Tuesday at 7 p.m., the first part of that will be strategic planning discussion. We'll cover what we have, just make sure it still makes sense to everybody, and any, look for any changes anybody wants to make. So first part of that meeting, we'll just go through that, and then the rest of it will be the solar discussion. So we'll set a meeting up after we see what comes out of that strategic planning discussion.
City administrator, staff comments.
Just a couple things I think it was Friday. Time's going fast here. We had the big windstorm blow through here. We had some damage. A fence at Sullivan Square blew over because of that. That was kind of unexpected, but that's back up. Our guys got that back. And of course, everybody in town knows we did lose power there for a few seconds. Basically, it's because our feed to Gardner was blown over out there near Blackjack Park, actually. I think some trees took down that feed. So it looks like it automatically switched then to the Ottawa feed, and like it's supposed to do. So we lost and then gained it right back. And our folks were down at the power plant that night, waiting for something to, if we had to run or not, but we didn't. So that's the way we survived it, though. So the system worked as it's designed to do. So when we lost Gardner, it came right back on the Ottawa feed. So that's why we got 2 feeds there. So it worked out great.
Good.
So just let people know that.
Any council comments? Not. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn.
Oh, tie.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. We're adjourned.
Don't be too eager.